Savannah didn't seem to care. Dry grass swayed in the wind, and the sky seemed to be burning from the heat. Amidst this silence, a silhouette moved slowly and uncertainly, as if every movement caused pain. It was a cheetah, but there was no grace or strength left in its gait. It staggered from weakness. There was a huge abscess on its front paw, swollen and tight. It looked unnaturally large, and with every step it took, it seemed as if the paw was about to burst. The pus inside it trembled as if it were alive, making the sight unbearable. Its skin in that spot had darkened and stretched to the limit. It seemed that the pain had become familiar to him. He tried to sit down, but immediately got up. His paw was giving him no peace. His eyes showed anguish, suffering, and a complete lack of hope. No one was around, no sound. Only him and the pain. Then he slowly moved on, following his instincts. He didn't know if anyone would see him, but that hope still lingered inside him. The rescuers approached slowly, so as not to scare the exhausted cheetah. One of them saw the animal trying to get up, but it immediately fell back down, its paw trembling with pain. A huge abscess on its front leg was throbbing. It was the size of a human head, and it seemed that it would explode at any moment. One of the rescuers signaled to the other. "Look, the pus has already started to seep out." They knew there was no time to waste. One held the cheetah firmly by the torso, stroking its head, while the other carefully approached with a sterile scalpel. And when he made the incision, everything around them seemed to freeze. Thick, yellow-white pus gushed out of the wound, accompanied by a strong odor. It flowed in streams, dripping onto the ground and soaking the grass. The animal twitched, but did not break free. It seemed that the cheetah understood that it was being saved. With every second, more and more pus came out, as if the entire leg was filled with this horror. It was not a sight for the faint of heart. One of the rescuers even turned away, but continued to hold on. The cheetah was breathing heavily, but now there was something new in its eyes: relief. After the pus had drained out, the rescuers applied a clean bandage soaked in antiseptic to the wound. The cheetah no longer resisted. He lay there, seemingly drained, but calm. His eyes were half closed, his breathing heavy but steady. They carefully lifted him onto a stretcher. He was so light, as if he were not a wild animal, but simply a bag of bones and skin. His spine and ribs were visible through his stretched, dry skin. His body trembled from dehydration and weakness. The animal ambulance started moving. Inside, it was sterile, with an IV and dim lighting. One of the rescuers sat next to him, fanning the cheetah with a damp cloth. Along the way, they checked his blood pressure and temperature, and monitored his breathing. Every minute could have been its last. But the cheetah held on. Despite the pain, it did not growl or hiss. It just lay there. As if, for the first time in a long time, it felt safe. The veterinary clinic was located in the middle of nowhere, but its walls saved hundreds of animals. This is where the cheetah was brought. He was on the brink of death. His body was emaciated, his temperature was unstable, and his paw was swollen even after drainage. But the team was ready. The veterinarian stayed by his side for hours. First, they gave him painkillers, then cleaned the wound again, removing the remaining pus. The bandage was soaked with blood, but even though the pus was no longer flowing so profusely, the inflammation persisted. The fur on his paw was shaved off, revealing irritated red skin with a deep hole from the abscess. The cheetah had to be fed through a tube because he couldn't eat on his own. A drip slowly fed nutrient solutions into his veins. Sometimes he opened his eyes. Sometimes he stared into space. One morning, he moved his ears for the first time in response to a sound. Then he raised his head. It was a small but important step. At that moment, the woman who was caring for him smiled for the first time in all that time. They believed he would pull through. Several days had passed since the operation. Pus was no longer accumulating in his leg. Rescuers came every day, carefully washed the wound, changed the bandages, and doctors closely monitored the slightest signs of inflammation. And more often, with relief, they noted that he was on the mend. The cheetah lay on a soft bedding in the shade of a special enclosure. His body was still emaciated, his bones protruded, his skin hung like old fabric. But now he was eating. In small portions, cautiously, with breaks. His eyes no longer darted around in search of danger. He was watching. Just watching. Every evening, a woman came to him, the same woman who had stood by him in the savannah while he was bleeding to death. She didn't speak. She just sat down next to him. Sometimes she read aloud, sometimes she was silent, and he began to breathe more deeply, more calmly. One day, he suddenly raised his head. He looked at her, then at the door. Then, slowly, with trembling paws, he stood up. Only for a few seconds. But it was like a miracle. He wanted to stand up. He wanted to move. He wanted to live. The savannah was filling with life again. Flocks of birds cut through the orange sky, and the hot wind carried with it the smell of dry earth and a distant thunderstorm. Among the hills, in the tall grasses, a silhouette was creeping. Fast, smooth, almost invisible. It was him, the same cheetah, once dying from a festering wound, now, again the master of speed. On his front leg there was a barely visible scar, but it no longer interfered. It had become part of his history, like a trace of time, of the horror he had experienced and his return to life. He moved easily, with a powerful grace, characteristic only of predators who had escaped from the clutches of death. Sometimes, stopping on a hill, the cheetah looked into the distance, where the trees were lost and the horizon began. The wind stirred the grass, and he felt, somewhere there, hundreds of steps away, lived those who once were not afraid of pain and pus, who approached him when he was already lying, almost broken. He may not have understood the words, but he remembered with his soul the touch of a hand, the taste of water, and the smell of syringes that brought pain, but also salvation. And far, far away, in a small village, a woman would come out every morning with a cup of tea, sit on a bench in front of the house, and look towards the horizon. Sometimes her husband would sit down next to her, also silent. They knew that he had gone, as he should have, back into the wild. But in each of their hearts there remained a thread of connection, invisible, strong. He was a part of their lives, just as they became a part of his path. As the sun was setting, the cheetah raised his head again. In front of him was a boundless savannah, full of sounds, smells, and freedom. He was no longer a victim. He was a memory. He was a force. He was the one who had returned.